I'm Gayla McCluskey of the Radnor League of Women Voters. The Friends to Preserve Radnor has asked the League to moderate the discussion this evening. We want to thank Mr. Haney from PennDOT for taking time to hear the community's concerns about pedestrian and vehicle traffic associated with Villanova's planned redevelopment. While this is the sole purpose tonight, the League, and I'm sure many in attendance, respectfully ask PennDOT to consider the project in concert with the other planned redevelopment projects that are occurring nearby. These include the redevelopment of the former Wyeth property at the intersection of King of Prussia and Route 30, the construction of several homes in Ardrossan off Newtown Road, and the new office building proposed on Radnor-Chester Road. These in total will have a detrimental effect on the intersections from Ithan Avenue through King of Prussia and beyond, as well as the neighborhoods surrounding these projects. We trust that PennDOT's decisions will be guided by the Township's comprehensive land use plan. And now I'd like to introduce Roberta Winters, who will be serving as a moderator this evening.
Good evening, and thank you for coming to this evening's event to add your input as residents to the Pennsylvania Department of Transportation regarding the planned development along Lancaster Avenue by Villanova University. We are delighted to serve as moderators this evening. In the interest of maximizing citizen participation, we have established some rules for operating this evening. First, we will begin with some presentations limited to 10 minutes each. First, there will be one by Villanova University, and the second by Friends to Preserve Radnor. Fran Haney, Assistant District Traffic Engineer for Traffic Services with PennDOT, has the responsibility to ask questions or request clarifying information as needed whenever throughout this evening. We are grateful that many of our Radnor staff who have special knowledge are present this evening, and citizens who are present tonight will have 5 minutes to present their input. I trust that those of you who wanted to comment have signed in on the sheet. I would ask you to begin by stating your name and address and about how far away you are located from this development, such as, 1 block, a quarter of a mile, 3 miles. Our timer, who's seated up front, will show you a yellow card when you have 1 minute left and a red card when your time is up. After everyone has had the opportunity to speak, audience members will have the opportunity to raise their hands and ask questions. The League will provide microphones, and you will be asked, whenever you speak, to just raise your hand and someone will come to you with a microphone. The League will consult with Mr. Haney at the end of all of our questions, and based on our conversations, the possibility for residents to return for an additional 2 minutes of comments at the end of the public input session will also be provided. Our focus tonight is limited only to vehicular and pedestrian traffic along the impacted vicinity. If your comments go astray, as moderator, I will remind you of our topic. If you continue to elaborate on other issues, we will ask you to refocus, and after 2 warnings, you continue to go off topic, we will ask you to just stop. Ultimately, we will have control of the microphones. In the interest of time, we would also ask you to listen actively, and rather than repeat what another has said, concur or disagree with statements that have previously been made. Add your own details and support your views. Periodically, Mr. Haney will have the opportunity to seek a sense of the audience. So if he asks you to show your hands if you agree, please do so. If you disagree, please do so. If you're unsure, show that as well. Now I'm going to ask to begin with some opening remarks by Mr. Haney. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. I want to thank you all for coming. I want to thank Radnor Township, the League of Women Voters for moderating, Representative Vitale for being here, and Villanova University. As I was introduced, I'm the Traffic Services Manager for PennDOT, Assistant Traffic Engineer. I go by many titles. I'm the ADA guy. I'm a lot of different things. Don't ask me about potholes, though. Sorry. PennDOT's role here is as a reviewing and permitting agency only. This is actually Villanova's project, with the exception of the PennDOT will provide oversight for the pedestrian bridge, for which Villanova received a grant funding for. But once again, it is Villanova's project and not a department-initiated project. Our role here is to be impartial and look at the facts. We review land developments all the time. We have standardized methodologies for looking at traffic, standardized procedures for looking at things such as signal timing, length of turning lanes, need for such things, that sort of thing. We've been working with Villanova and Radnor Township for approximately 2 years, and no permit has been issued. And as of this time, our review still continues. So I welcome your input tonight, and thank you for offering me the opportunity to relate PennDOT's views.
Thank you. Our first presentation tonight is going to be by Frank Tavani of Villanova University.
Thank you very much. I know my time is limited, so I will get right into it. There are basically 3 subjects that we would like to cover tonight. As some of you probably know from last night's Planning Commission meeting, 2 of the more urgent issues are discussion of the possibility of adding an eastbound right turn lane on Lancaster Avenue, which is shown here, to turn and head south on Ithan Avenue, which is shown here. The second issue concerns this radius, which that movement defines. And then the last issue was a request for some traffic simulations, which will be the last issue that I discuss tonight. First, it's appropriate to visit what the existing conditions are, which this graphic intends to depict. Lancaster Avenue at this location currently features 5 lanes, 2 through lanes in each direction, eastbound being here, westbound being here, opposing left turn lanes, eastbound and westbound, and all these lanes are 10 feet wide for a total cross-section existing of 50 feet. This existing radius is a little complicated, but it's approximately 17 feet, give or take, depending on where you actually make the measurement, but 17 is a good approximation. And this crosswalk, which I'll refer to as the eastbound crosswalk, is important because the existing intersection has a 26-second PED scramble phase, as most of you probably know. During that time, all traffic stops and pedestrians can use any 4 crosswalks at their discretion. This particular crosswalk is significant because it's the longest crosswalk, and therefore its length dictates the clearance interval time of that PED scramble phase. It's currently 64 feet as measured at its midpoint, and as you can see, the path basically goes from one corner to the next and not at a mid-block location, for example. You try to get the pedestrians as close to the corners as possible because that's where they're going. The last thing I should mention is there are existing offsets to the stop bars on all 4 approaches today, and that's because the intersection of Ithan and Lancaster is a little skewed. So you can see, for example, that on the northbound approach, the northbound left turn stop bar is set back slightly from the through and right turn lane stop bar. So next we should look at what's currently proposed by the applicant, by Villanova. We're currently proposing maintaining the 3 eastbound lanes. PennDOT, the better part of 2 years ago, as Mr. Haney pointed out, has already told us that the 10-foot lanes should be widened, and in fact, the outer through lanes here and here should be 12 feet wide. The inside through lanes should be 11 feet wide, and the left turn lane should be 10 feet. So right from the bat, we're already increasing the cross-section of the road by 6 feet, from 50 to 56. And going forward on all successive slides, you'll see the existing conditions shown in grayscale in the background to give some perspective of how things are proposed to change with the current plan and how they could change further if other modifications are made. So we go from 50 to 56 feet. We're proposing increasing the radius from 17 feet, which is shown here, to 25 feet, which is a 50% increase over the existing condition. We're making it 8 feet longer, so that's actually a pretty significant change. Some people have commented that traffic has to slow down dramatically in order to turn right, and that sometimes through traffic behind that right turning traffic has a risk of hitting that vehicle or just feels uncomfortable. Of course, the speed limit is posted 25 on Lancaster, but we believe this 50% increase in radius will try to increase that turning speed, but not increase it too much, knowing how much of a pedestrian environment there is. One of the hallmarks of the plan is an increase in the offset between the northbound left turn stop bar and the through right turn stop bar, as defined by this gold double-headed arrow, and that's to allow trucks to actually make this turning movement without encroaching into the northbound left turn lane. In fact, the existing northbound left turn lane is probably not where it should be and should be set back a little further than where it currently is. You can see it's pretty far up, and if a large wheelbase vehicle does make that turn, it will encroach into that lane. So that's what we're proposing. And as you can see, the crosswalk does get shifted a little bit and becomes somewhat more perpendicular. This requires changing the sidewalk on the northern side of the crosswalk, and this is an attempt to maintain that crosswalk length at 64 feet, knowing the role it plays in the signal timings for the pit clearance interval. We've been asked to abide by the township requirement to make this radius 35 feet as dictated by code as opposed to the 25 feet that we're proposing. And you can see that that makes it significantly larger. We're effectively doubling the radius from what exists today. And in doing so, the crosswalk gets significantly longer since the crosswalk intersects that radius. And even if we go to full perpendicularity and move the crosswalk as far as you can see, it's defined by this purple double-headed arrow, we still keep 64 feet, yet where the pedestrians wind up is now becoming sort of a questionable path. As Mr. Haney pointed out, the reviews by PennDOT are pending. We have not yet applied for any signal permit applications. The signals unit of PennDOT would review all these applications and determine whether or not that path or this path or something even closer to the existing path is appropriate. But this change directly results from the 35-foot radius and nothing else.
Frank, pardon me. I just wanted to suggest something. Where that crosswalk is located, there's a problem. We would not allow it because when you're coming out of Ithan on the other side, what we're looking for is we're not just a vehicle agency. We're a pedestrian, we're a multimodal agency here. To have a pedestrian align themselves that far from the intersection of Ithan means that it reduces the visibility of the pedestrian to that driver who would be making that right turn. So that 64 feet would not be permitted by PennDOT as far as the placement of that crossing. Thank you.
Thank you. The last condition that was discussed is the addition of a fourth eastbound lane, a new exclusive right turn lane. Typically, curbed right turn lanes are 14 feet wide, and as we've heard from PennDOT previously, they're allowing the inside through lanes to be 11 feet. So if we add a right turn lane, that means both of the through lanes inside would be 11, this would be 14, and effectively you're just adding 13 feet of new width, but it's still a dramatic increase, and we go from 56 to 69 feet in total cross-section, which is dramatically wider than what currently exists and really changes the whole feel of the intersection and the roadway, especially since it's 50 feet today. Even if we tried to maintain the crosswalk perpendicularity, which you just heard would not be approved, even doing that would still be 10 feet longer, which means a longer pedestrian clearance phase and means reduced efficiencies for all traffic as well as pedestrians. And then finally, the northbound left turn stop bar gets pushed back even further. Previously, it was approximately here where the arrow is. It would go back even further, basically because this entire curb and radius gets chased further south. And now you start getting into the question, whether or not a northbound left-turning motorist would even stop there. They might be tempted to stop further up, causing complications. And then finally, something to consider is a right turn on red restriction is likely at this intersection. The intersection only has one receiving lane, southbound on Ithan Avenue. So you have a shared phase for through traffic on Lancaster. Then you have a shared phase for Ithan Avenue. So the through traffic that's getting discharged would be competing with any right-turning traffic that would be stopped and trying to turn. It would be unlikely they would find gaps in that southbound flow, so there would probably not be even an opportunity. But with the pedestrian presence that is known at this intersection and other factors, we believe that a no turn on red restriction would be imposed, which further underscores how ineffective or unhelpful that lane would even be. So in conclusion, what is currently proposed is already increasing the eastbound radius 50%, which is a significant increase. This will benefit the concept that there is this reduced speed associated with existing right-turning traffic, and thus right turns may turn somewhat faster, but not too fast. We certainly don't want to encourage high speeds going around that radius, so we think this is a good balance, and in fact is why we chose 25 feet instead of 35 and instead of 17. We believe the eastbound crosswalk should be maintained at 64 feet or less if we can, since doing so minimizes pedestrian exposure in Route 30. One of the hallmarks of multimodalism, as Mr. Haney pointed out, is recognizing that it's not just cars, it's people, cyclists, scepter riders. So it's appropriate to try and keep traffic out of the roadway if we can, and longer crosswalks work contrary to that intent. Making the crosswalk longer means that, or keeping the crosswalk at its current length or shorter means that we maximize operational efficiencies for traffic flow, which is a desire. Pedestrian paths and stop bars must be kept realistic. As Mr. Haney pointed out already, there seems to be a problem with one of the designs with 35-foot radius, at least as depicted in the sketch. And the no turn on red restrictions are likely. And one thing I didn't point out to this point is, how much traffic would even be served by this right turn lane that's under consideration. And what I'm showing at the bottom of this screen are excerpts from the traffic study that was submitted in March. Under future full build 2025 conditions, the predicted right turn volume during the AM peak is 23 vehicles. It's only about 2.4% of the total approach activity, and during the PM peak hour, it's 92 vehicles, or about 7.6. This translates to about 1 or 2 vehicles per cycle. It doesn't really translate to very much. I've already been given my 1-minute warning, and I'm talking as fast as I possibly can. I haven't even gotten to the traffic simulations, so I don't know if I should stop here or continue.
Given the nature of the meeting, let's give you 5 more minutes, and that's it.
You got it. Okay, so this is a program called Sim Traffic. It attempts to depict existing conditions as well as proposed conditions. It's not going to give you a 100% reflection of what you may see day in, day out on the roadway, but it's a valuable tool in comparing one scenario to another closely related scenario. So what I've loaded up here is the PM peak hour condition from the full build, which was those volumes that you just saw, with the proposed alignment, with the proposed eastbound approach as we're proposing it, an exclusive left turn, one through lane, and a shared through right. Over here is where the PAC, the Performing Arts Center, will be, and the proposed access, which is a right in, right out, left in access. All movements are permitted except for exiting left turns. Those are prohibited. It's a stop controlled intersection. Further south on Ithan Avenue, there's a four-legged intersection with stop signs on the side street, and all these left turn lanes are shown pretty much to scale as we're currently depicting it. And I'm going to speed this up to 4 times real speed, just in the interest of time and also boredom. And you can see now that the intersection is starting to load up. This, again, is the PM peak hour condition. And what we're really looking for are just how long these queues get, especially here where we have a situation not so much for the exiting left turns, which are prohibited, but for the entering left turns, which we would like to try and get into the site rather than go up to Ithan and then turn left and go into the garage that way. So we'll let this run just for a little bit of time, as much time as we're afforded, and you'll see that under normal PM peak hour conditions, the traffic flows quite well. The actual predicted queues for each of the respective turning lanes are accommodated by the proposed turning lane lengths. Occasionally, as we all know, the through traffic queue does extend beyond the existing left turn lane, which incidentally ends right about here, and we're essentially doubling that storage back to here, for example, even though most of the activity is to the south of the site. But essentially, everything is relatively uneventful, which is good, and which means that we've been hopefully planning appropriately for the last 2.5 years that these traffic studies have been taking place. Now what I want to show you is that same condition with a right turn lane added. And I just arbitrarily made it 150 feet, which seems to be appropriate given the volumes. These colors, by the way, are not random. A yellow car indicates a vehicle that's going to turn right at the next downstream node. White is going straight through, and blue is turning left. So you can see that there's a car here wanting to turn right, and there's a few more that actually are caught in the queue, but in short order, in a matter of seconds, we'll actually be able to get to the intersection and turn. The colors then change depending on where they're going at the next node. But as you can see, there's just not a whole lot of activity in that right turn lane, again, because even during the PM peak hour, there's only 92 vehicles per hour making that turn. That's about 1 vehicle every 1.5 minutes. It's not exactly a lot of traffic. It's a handful of cars in the 10 or 15 minutes I've been talking. So that one's that. And then lastly, we also were asked to simulate a special event condition, in which case we took some basketball counts that there were traffic counts conducted on December 11th, 2012 during a home basketball game. And those counts were modified even further, where we multiplied the turning activity going into the PAC by 250% of existing PM peak hour conditions to give as much conservative measure as possible. Although we couldn't model what exactly was going on within the garage itself, we did actually include a node here, which is a signalized intersection with a 120-second cycle. That doesn't exist and won't exist within the garage, but was put there intentionally to try and create a delay, to try and create a condition where a queue would develop, which is potentially unrealistic, but depending on what the credentialing process is like within the garage during special events, could potentially model some added delay and friction. This length is realistic based on what's proposed for the length of the throat. And if you watch this condition, you'll see that it never spills back into the intersection, and the storage that's proposed for the right turn lane going into the site also never gets filled because this never gets filled. The left turn lane you may have just saw a few seconds ago there actually did have briefly 4 vehicles in it, which is essentially the maximum of that left turn lane. And again, this is almost tripling the volumes that are predicted to occur during the PM peak. With 1,289 parked cars in this garage and knowing that some of them are going to be dedicated to students, it's my opinion that the 450 vehicles that we're modeling making this turn in 1 hour represents a very saturated condition that's unlikely to actually occur and is therefore very conservative. And maybe I'll finish 30 seconds early. No, right on time. 5 seconds.
Thank you. Would you hold your questions until everyone has presented and everyone who has wanted to give comments does? If you would like, there are some note cards if someone wants to jot down questions. They're in the bag back there with Mrs. Underwood. If you want to jot down a question so you don't forget it, and then we'll ask the questions after everyone has had a chance to present. Yes, you can.
Frank?
Yes.
Okay. Describe, once again, I hadn't mentioned that we're trying to seek a balance between pedestrians and vehicles.
Yes.
And for everyone in the audience, the walk time is approximately 2.3 feet per second?
3.5, I believe.
3.5, I thought we lowered it, but it's somewhere in that range.
It used to be 4.0, and in
Okay.
fact, the existing clearance interval is based on that. And since
Okay.
we're making the intersection wider, going from 50 to 56, that adds to the clearance interval. Additionally, since the standard dropped from 4 feet per second to 3.5, that adds to the interval. We believe that the existing walk time interval, which is 9 seconds, could be reduced to 6 or 7, and then that time be added to the clearance interval to offset those changes I just pointed out and maintain the existing overall pedestrian phase at 26 seconds.
So with the additional widening and the location of the crosswalk that I described, we're talking about a fairly significant increase in that clearance interval, thus affecting all the other legs of the intersection?
Yes, that's a good point. I did fail to illustrate this earlier, so thank you for that. This is the existing alignment of the crosswalk. There might be some flexibility with the signals unit to translate.
There will be, a little bit.
A little bit, to move it over maybe to here, in which case it wouldn't be 74 feet, and it certainly wouldn't be 64 feet. But if it started here and basically went to the same location, you could see how much longer that would be compared to the existing conditions. So instead of 64 feet, just eyeballing it, that's probably about 85. So you're adding 21 feet. If you divide 21 by 3.5, that's the number of additional seconds you would be adding to the pedestrian phase. That means you might be going from 26 to 35, which is at the expense of traffic, either on Ithan or on Lancaster, which means that there would be some noticeable added delays to the traffic with that kind of added clearance interval time.
I have one more thing. The timing of the Performance Arts Center and the garage versus the right turning lane that you are seeking to build at the entrance to that
Right.
garage. It is our opinion that that is needed regardless of the Performing Arts Center, whether or when that happens. If this is the plan for the event management, then that right turn lane, if, depending on the outcome, and nothing has been ultimately concluded, but is it Villanova's intention to move forward with that facility sooner and as soon as possible?
Yes. There might be someone who could give a more specific answer, but this was discussed last night as well. And even if the PAC doesn't move forward, this access will be constructed along with the auxiliary turn lanes shown.
Okay, and I don't want to monopolize the time, but I'm hoping you guys are liking these questions. Describe your approach to the transportation impact study. What was the goal of this project, and what were you tasked with doing by both Radnor Township and PennDOT, supporting Radnor Township regarding like the trip generation?
Right. As many people have heard me say a number of times over the years, the project is actually bringing currently commuting students, 1,100 plus of them, onto campus, which means at least during peak periods, they won't be commuting and therefore won't be driving on the roads, which is typically when traffic studies are focused on, the AM peak and the PM peak. In order to create the most conservative study possible, we were asked to treat all of the existing parking spaces and how they turn over today exactly the same in the future condition as they do today, which is counterintuitive because we all know that those people won't be going out to their car, driving around the block, and then coming back to walk to class. Those cars will be stagnant. So the study was already, from the very beginning, very conservatively addressed, conservatively framed from its trip generation component. We were asked to study 17 intersections, which is one of the, I think, the largest scope I've ever reviewed or performed myself in 22 years. And that included both state routes and non-state routes. We've done everything as conservatively as we've been asked. We've added left turn lanes and right turn lanes at Church Walk, neither of which I think were necessarily warranted, but we recognize served a purpose. We were asked to close multiple unregulated driveways west of Church Walk, I believe 7 or 8 of them, just to reduce the friction that occurs along Route 30 and consolidate that to a new right-in, right-out only access, as well as sharing the access with the signal at Church Walk for left turns in and left turns out, which also benefits through traffic, including non-Villanova traffic. So there's been a lot of effort and a lot of focus.
Okay, I'd now like to have the next presentation by Friends to Preserve Radnor.
Good evening. I'm Tish Long from Friends to Preserve Radnor. I live on Alderman Lane. We certainly would like to thank the League of Women Voters this evening for moderating this traffic discussion, and we'd also like to thank Bob Zinkowski and Steve Norsini for facilitating it. We welcome Fran Henney and certainly Greg Vitale. We are so grateful that you are here. Tonight we are here to discuss traffic as it relates to the Villanova development project. To date, both the applicant and Radnor Township staff have met with PennDOT. Limited information has been released from these meetings. Tonight marks the very first opportunity for residents to voice their concerns. For 3.5 years, there's been much discussion regarding every aspect of this proposed project. The common denominator for all of the residents remains traffic. Traffic remains our biggest concern and the issue that all the residents can relate to. We all agree that traffic is bad now. We're already burdened with traffic and gridlock on Lancaster Avenue and the surrounding neighborhoods on a daily basis. With this 300% density increase to an already dense area of the township, how will pedestrian and vehicular safety be guaranteed? How will we manage special event traffic? And should there be an emergency, how can we ensure emergency vehicles will be able to have access? What will the financial burden be to the township with this increased traffic? How will this impact residents? In the end, the impending traffic burden to the township and the residents is high, and the residents want to hear how this project is going to be accomplished while preserving our suburban community. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Rick Leonardi. I live on 30 Alderman Lane. Good evening, Mr. Haney, Mr. Vitale, Ms. Winters, thank you very much. Neighbors, how are you all? In October of 2008, the downtown architectural firm of Venturi Scott Brown Associates produced a master plan for Villanova University to help guide the school's future development. While the plan focused primarily on classroom and library upgrades, as these were felt to be VU's chief deficiencies, recommendations for student housing expansion and increased parking were included as well. The proposal called for the addition of 1,180 new beds in 4 dorms, evenly arranged along Lancaster Avenue with Church Walk as the midpoint. almost 2,600 parking spaces spread among 4 surface facilities and 2 garages, and distributed from Pikefield all the way to Aldwin Center at 320, were to be created to replace Main Lot. All but one of these facilities would have been served directly from Route 30 at points well before the Ithan-Lancaster intersection. A pedestrian mall was intended to stretch the length of this project and featured an orchard garden mirroring the one before the church, standing directly opposite from it across Lancaster. The plan we're discussing today calls for constructing about this same number of beds, plus assorted retail outlets and a bar, in a fraction of the space, entirely on Main Lot. It concentrates the parking currently spread across a third of a mile of Lancaster frontage into a single massive structure, which will be built on Ithan Avenue, a minor collector. It proposes the relocation of Chapel Drive to the west and a continuation of this roadway around the back of the dorm project through to Ithan Avenue to service this garage. It calls for the construction of a pedestrian bridge 425 feet long and at least 30 steps in the air, running from the existing P&W overpass to the foot of the church staircase, with a draconian system of gates and fencing to compel its use by all pedestrians. VU plans to build a new parking lot behind some of its offices along West Lancaster and to add some capacity at the SAC garage, the St. Augustine Center garage, for a pickup of about 400 spots. But the new Pike garage, with parking for 1,300 cars, will be the primary destination for drivers seeking to park on campus, and the primary storage for the hundreds of students living directly across the street from it. In the latest plan, access to this garage will be from Ithan at a newly created 4-way intersection just north of the P&W Bridge, or via a roadway wrapping around the future Performing Arts Center from Route 30. Exits from the garage will be onto Ithan or back out this Performing Arts Center road for eastbound Route 30 only, as you've heard. A small village of anywhere from 600 to 1,100 residents, depending on whose numbers you trust, is going to be created at the corner of Ithan and Lancaster Avenue. One guess is at least 700 of these new residents will bring their cars. And while it is obviously true that these students will no longer be commuting anywhere, the idea that they will not be using these cars on a daily basis is ludicrous. To make locating a garage this size on a street as constricted as Ithan remotely feasible, the following road improvements will be required at a minimum. Number one is widening Lancaster from Pikefield eastward back to Barleycone Road to accommodate the new extended westbound left turn queue waiting to enter the Performing Arts Center road from Lancaster. Number two, widening Ithan to a full 3 lanes all the way back to the P&W Bridge with a likely green arrow from the left turn lane for westbound Lancaster. Number three, either a right turn lane from Lancaster to southbound Ithan to allow deceleration and safe turning movement through the existing 110-degree corner, or at least a significant redesign of the corner with a more generous radius, as this right turn is the only allowed route for trucks making deliveries to VU's loading pit. A turn analysis using verifiable modeling needs to be generated in support of either option. A widening Lancaster to a full 70 feet at Chapel Drive, number 4, necessitated by the lane offset and island. Despite the distance, a crosswalk must be retained here, as the retail outlets along the north side of Lancaster at 320 will still be the only public eating and shopping options within easy walking distance for the 1,135 students in the new dorms along the south side of Lancaster Avenue. These modifications to Lancaster Avenue will necessarily affect other developments along the corridor which will occur in the same time frame or which are already underway. Number one, the 325 Points intersection, which has long been problematic, will face redesign as new retail makes its appearance on the corners. Number two, the development at 77 East Lancaster and the Villanova Center Light at Lancaster Avenue will create a completely new traffic flow between the Blue Route and 320. The left turn Q lane trailing back under the P&W Bridge from eastbound Lancaster at this intersection seems particularly dangerous. The approval of the Biomed plan, number 3, will have an enormous impact as several thousand locally bound drivers add themselves to what has been up to now a flow of commuters from the south, cutting off the 476-76 interchange and descending to work in the Great Valley via King of Prussia Road. Level of service at this intersection is already infamously bad, and accidents are common. Mr. Haney, it is our view that traffic along this length of the Lancaster corridor will not be improved by Villanova's project. It is our belief that the single decision to build a garage for 1,300 vehicles on Ithan Avenue creates a cascade of bad effects requiring a series of increasingly unfortunate workarounds. Pretending that there will be no increase in vehicular traffic at the Ith and Lancaster intersection, or that 10,000 pedestrian crossings per day at this intersection is not a concern, we feel does not constitute good planning or neighborly consideration. We hope that PennDOT, which is uniquely positioned to study the entirety of the corridor and its behavior, and which can mandate the adjustments necessary to keep it passable, will apply its expertise, exercise its authority, and help us put this plan right. Thank you.
I guess I just wanted to say one thing, and certainly I respect your concerns. And I also want to state that, when we were first presented this project, we shared the same exact concerns. I mean, these are the same questions that we ask, not just to Villanova, of all developers of any significance. And I want to let you know we are working with the other developers, the Villanova Center, the office building on Radnor Chester Road. If I got that wrong, I apologize. But yes, we are working with the other developers in the area. And one thing I do want to make clear, we try to do our due diligence as best as possible. And I think as evidenced by, and I'm not here to defend anybody's project. I'm here to defend PennDOT's integrity and our objectivity in this review process, and to hear your concerns. But nobody is pretending that there'll be no increase in traffic. And as Frank had laid out in response to my question, both Radnor Township and PennDOT, in support of Radnor Township, have asked them to modify their study to make sure that it is overly conservative, because we understand the problems that are going on around here. We understand the existing conditions that you have to face every day, and we occasionally drive through, but we're here to represent you. We're here to help represent the township, here to help represent Villanova. So I want to make it clear, nobody's pretending that there is no traffic. And in fact, we have tasked them with overemphasizing the traffic just to be sure.
Thank you. I'd like to ask if Commissioner Fisher would like to do a presentation at this point. I know you wanted to speak for about 5 minutes.
Probably less, but I do have a few pictures I just want to throw up. This may take me a moment to get this working the best I can. Just a bit of background. I'm the commissioner in the 7th Ward, which is pretty much everything east of Ithan Avenue to the McDonald's and then down to Roberts. So the 5,600 residents that I represent have to live, breathe, and sleep Lancaster Avenue traffic, Conestoga Road traffic. And I've been a resident for 29 years, so this is not something new to me. I fully understand this. Have lived in the Garrett Hill section of Radnor for that long. We have a lot of engineers, we have a lot of traffic studies, and I see a lot of head shaking. As an elected official, we look at the way people respond to information. And one thing that I see is a lot of skepticism around the numbers. So there were some numbers thrown out tonight that were not exactly correct. For instance, there was a statement that 90 vehicles turning per hour is about 1 vehicle per minute and a half. Well, that's actually 1 vehicle per 40 seconds. So this is one example where the data, while it may have been misspoken, doesn't match the facts. Okay, so as an elected official, what I have to do is try to understand what the residents are feeling, what they're experiencing, and what can I do in my power to make that better? What can I do as an elected official? There was another number that was thrown out, or a perception that was thrown out, that if we widen the road by 12 feet, we add 1 turning lane, that could have a significant impact on the walk phase. Well, at 4 feet per second, which is the typical walk time of a pedestrian, it's 3 seconds additional time, 3 seconds. At 3.2 feet per second, it's 3.75 seconds. So we're talking between 3 and 4 seconds time that we would add to a 1 dedicated walk phase per walk phase crossing. Yet,
the turning vehicles. We know that these turning vehicles, if anyone drives down that stretch of road, just do it a few times, do it 10 times, and you'll find that on every day between 4 and 5 p.m., if you try to traverse through Villanova University now without any new construction, without any new activity, without any new parking garages, without any new construction like Performing Arts Center, that right turning lane stops periodically every phase. And it's because 1 or 2 or 3 vehicles are trying to turn right, and they can't because 2 things are happening. Pedestrians are collecting on the corner, and they don't have a clear vision of where they're turning into. So they go very cautiously around that turn. So that holds up the lane. So if we were to increase the radius of that intersection, it'd probably have a big impact on improving flow. But adding a turning lane of 12 feet would only add 4 seconds to the ped phase. So, I have a hard time understanding why that's a big deal. So, let me just back up. These vehicles are turning. Not only is the through lane that they're turning from is being slowed down, but the other lane that is a through lane, the left lane, is also slowing down because drivers perceive one car slowing down as a reason to slow down. So, whether that's sympathy or whether that's caution, these drivers in the other lane are also slowing down because they perceive something is in the way. So not only do we have the slowed down the right lane, which is a through lane, but we also have a slowed down left lane, which is a through lane. In my opinion, adding the turn lanes, which is very common, very typical, you would expect it in any other major development in any town in Pennsylvania. Yet here we're not expecting to do that. There's been a political decision made. But it's not an engineering decision, it's a political decision. The political decision was to not add a turning lane, even though the engineers, even though the professional staff felt that it was important, the political decision was made not to do that. So I'll end with one photograph. I'll try to get this up here. I may put 2 or 3 up, but we'll see what we can get here. And this is one example of what I'm talking about. This is an event, Villanova. This is after the event. These are the vehicles leaving Villanova University. We have an enormous stacking that occurs. But even on a normal day where there's just general activity at Villanova University, there's a large amount of stacking that occurs in both lanes, both directions, all the time. So we really want to address this the best we can. And in my opinion, turning lanes would be a good way to go about that. The other thing I've noticed, and I do pay attention to these large events, is that vehicles are being instructed routinely to go to a certain direction or place to park. And here you'll notice a sign. My time is up, but I'll finish with this. You'll notice a sign on the right. It says, right at the third light. So this light in question in this picture is, in fact, Ithan Avenue. But what I find out is that many times the parking lots fill. And even though the sign will tell drivers to go to a different location, they continue to go down to Ithan Road and try to make a right turn. Now this comes from staff. The vehicles then have to be rerouted somewhere. And where do they go? They have to be sent down Alwyn Lane, which is a residential neighborhood. That's unacceptable. So we have 2 issues. We have issues where the vehicles don't pay attention to signs. I don't think we can fix that. Drivers are going to be drivers. They're going to keep doing that. We're going to have to make sure we have turn lanes to allow the stacking off the through lanes so the vehicles that are trying to get to Ardmore, Bryn Mawr, Wynwood, all of Lower Merion, all of Haverford Township can get through the township from the Blue Route to those destinations. So I'll finish with that, but I appreciate the engineering, but just live here for 29 years and you'll see what we're up against and see the reality of what people do and how drivers drive. And you'll see that these turning lanes are going to be crucial to fixing the problem. Thank you.
John? Yes. Yeah, okay. I don't know if I have a specific question for you per se, but I disagree. And once again, I'm not going to sit here and defend Villanova's project. I'm simply going to state the facts as I see them, as the information that's been presented to us so far, noting that we have not reached a conclusion on anything as of yet. You're wrong on the timing of the pedestrian crossing. It will be 7 seconds. It's not 4 feet per second. It's 3.5. And that crosswalk could increase to as much as 85 feet. That will add 7 seconds to every single cycle. There's only so many minutes in an hour. The cycle lengths are based on that time per hour. So depending on how many cycles we have per hour, that 7 seconds compounds itself over the hour. So it could have a significant effect on the capacity, and it will be as much as 7 seconds if you have this right turn lane. I certainly do understand your concern, and I hear you. I wouldn't want to be sitting there in that backup, that sort of thing. When we looked at this, the concept was to focus on some of the event management, because that is a big concern of PennDOT's, because we recognize that these problems do exist out here. And the thought was that instead of trying to manage all those vehicles at Ithan, why not manage them after Ithan? Make them through vehicles, which actually makes the intersection function better. Turning vehicles function less efficiently than through vehicles at any intersection. So let's get them past the intersection, into their own right turning lane, and then also store them in that garage's driveway. I believe Frank showed a diagram of the vehicles queuing in that driveway. There was also been discussion of modifying that driveway during event periods, event peaks, to actually create it as a double inbound lane in case the storage assumptions were incorrect, such that the vehicles could then be stored internally and off the roadway entirely. So that was a very strong point. And one last thing, I want to assure everyone here, there's no political decision being made here. No one has called my office and said anything about we want it this way, we want it that way, and no legislator that I know ever does that. You know, they may inquire as to how things are going or that sort of thing, but there is no political decision being made here, 100%. The events management plan is something that we have tasked Villanova with providing us. We have sat with the Radnor police force and continue to work with the Radnor police force, as we expect Villanova will, to ensure that this event management, which I believe from your presentation and from our previous knowledge, is extremely important to everyone here. And we're not issuing any permit until we are 100% satisfied that there is a solid plan in place to improve conditions over what they are today, okay, in regards to event management. And that's all I have for now. Thank you.
Okay, and I just want to clarify that, yes, I was wrong about the, if you're using the lower rate of pedestrian. But the other thing we talked about was why dedicated pedestrian walk phase. There are many times where there are not students at that light. I mean, this is actually, if you think about 16 hours a day, there are no students at that light. So, you know, generally from midnight till 6 a.m., there are no students at that light. So why are we dedicating this 26-second or 30-second walk phase? So we should definitely be looking at that.
I promise you we are looking at that.
And of course,
we had that same concern.
Yeah, and creating more opportunities for moving the vehicles around helps. But, you know, again, I ask everyone that's in question of this issue to actually traverse through that area between 4 p.m. and 6 p.m. on a daily basis and see what they experience, because that is not necessarily captured in the essence of an average. You know, if you look at averages, but if you look at the reality, the density of these turns that occur and the impact on the other lanes of traffic, it really does have, it's a noticeable difference, and it's something we live with. So appreciate it. Thank you for your comments. Yep.
I believe the next presentation is by Mr. R.
Thank you.
5 minutes,
5
right?
minutes. Thank you. Good evening. My name is Philip R. Reside on Meredith Avenue in Garrett Hill for 22 years. And thank you for the opportunity to speak for a few minutes on neighborhood traffic and safety concerns. And thanks to PennDOT, Representative Vitale, Radnor Township, and League of Women Voters for holding this meeting. I and other Garrett Hill neighbors are concerned that while Villanova rightfully takes steps to move the university into the 21st century, that we are not left with the last century's traffic and resulting safety problems. You know, it's said that Lancaster Avenue, Route 30, is PennDOT's road. And so some decisions are being left for the end. And while it is, thank you for listening to the residents and neighbors who use it and feel the effects of it every day. So we'd like PennDOT to weigh in on these issues because, quite simply, we still have significant questions. Because there's a disconnect between the promises and apparent facts surrounding this development. Commissioner Fisher alluded to a few of them. Here's a few more. We're concerned about the traffic problems, safety, spillover traffic into the neighborhoods, intruding into our adjacent neighborhoods. And a focal point of this concern is obviously centered at Lancaster and 9th Avenue, where right-hand traffic slows down the traffic flow and cars have move through this choke point overall. Now, on the one hand, we have a level of service for Lancaster Avenue and 9th Avenue that's characterized as failing. On the other hand, we have the biggest development in Radnor Township history, and at the end, that level of service will not be improved to any appreciable degree. We can do better. We would like to see better. We need PennDOT to weigh into this. We're provided traffic studies by Villanova, originally that showed how previously off-campus students will not have to add to the peak hour traffic. But these are upperclassmen who typically do not have rush hour, peak hour class hours. So where's the impact? Where's the savings? And some traffic studies were conducted before Labor Day, definitely not representative a time to gauge impact. And we experience jams at non-peak hour times. We're not just concerned with event management. Everybody knows around here you stay off the pike when there's an event. In fact, Villanova gives us warnings about that. We're concerned in our day-to-day stuff about what happens on non-peak hours just during regular days. So which is right? And we're counting on PennDOT to weigh in on these. And we hear claims that these intersections will have less activity, presumably because of the reduced parking. And yet now, 1,100 students will be living on this corner 24/7. And even if they use the pedestrian bridge and walk eastward down into Bryn Mawr and those areas down there, crossing 9th Avenue, we're told that there won't be much right turn traffic on 9th, and yet there'll be a parking garage for 1,200, accessed primarily via right turn lane off of Lancaster every day, 500 of which we're asked to believe will be warehoused and not in use, although we know that upperclassmen are still going to use it even if it's not on peak time. And yet still leaves 700 parking spaces in active daily use using that intersection, which is correct. It doesn't add up. And we're told that Villanova has a right turn lane, we're told by Villanova that a right turn lane is not warranted on eastbound Lancaster Avenue at Ithan. But during the conditional use hearings, Radnor's traffic expert provided a PennDOT workshop that shows that it is. In fact, she did the workshop off of PennDOT, and this is Township Exhibit number 5, where she presented this and said that using your worksheets that a right turn lane was indicated. So which is right? We need PennDOT to weigh in on this. We're told that traffic is not as bad as it seems, but residents know they either face delays traveling the pike or avoid using it by using Conestoga Road. What will happen when even more commuters follow suit and add to the bottlenecks on this and other collector streets? Villanova's traffic studies conclude that traffic will be no worse, perhaps a little better. Yet Radnor Township's traffic experts, the engineers, the police, the staff who work these, the police safety units disagree. And we ask that you carefully study their positions and recommendations. We need PennDOT to weigh in because these are competing concerns. So the question is, what will it take to improve the level of service at this intersection as Villanova improves its development? Before traffic jams impede fire and ambulance vehicles, before residents get even more stuck in traffic delays, before spillover traffic clogs neighborhood and collector streets, before predictable problems get to grow, we need you to weigh in now and help us also take Radnor Township into the 21st century with our traffic and safety needs. Thank you for listening and for your service.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Bill. And I want to assure you that that is our job. Our job is to represent you. We're not here on behalf of anyone in particular. We're here on behalf of everyone. We both represent Villanova, but we also represent you, the citizens. We also represent Radnor Township. So we are here to be impartial, and I've heard you loud and clear. And yes, we are asking some of the same questions. I do have some, one statement, and then I have some questions for the engineer. Okay?
Okay.
Okay? Yeah, well, no, a statement I'm going to make. I basically just want to be clear to everyone understands what our regulatory authority is here. I have no authority whatsoever to make Villanova go and solve all the pre-existing traffic problems. The authority I do have is to hold them to do no harm, to make things no worse. If they can demonstrate, after going through all of the engineering studies and performing those studies to our satisfaction and in conformance with the nationally accepted standards, that they have maintained or made slightly better the traffic conditions, I'm done. There's nothing else I can do other than what we are trying to do is focus on improving the operations and the functionality of everything and the safety of everything and the multimodal accommodations for everyone. But thank you very much. Now I do have some questions for the traffic engineer. No. And obviously, Amy, you can weigh in support if you need to. There was an allegation thrown out here that studies were done in off-season when the school was out. Is that true?
No, all the data collection was conducted in the fall of 2012. There were some earlier counts that were conducted at the very beginning of the project, but they were all superseded by later counts anyway.
So, to be 100% clear, the current numbers that we are reviewing were taken during school being in full session.
Absolutely. I have my study with me. I will triple check it, but we did not conduct any data collection when Villanova was not in session. That would be an egregious mistake.
I
And-
agree with
Go
that.
ahead, I'm sorry, thank you.
And we checked that, and they actually had to recount some intersections because they were during, when school was out of session. So it was both public, private, and the university were all operational.
Okay. And the event management, what event did you study? Where did you collect your numbers from?
We actually conducted counts during 2 special events, and the results are included at the very end of Appendix D of the currently submitted traffic study. First was homecoming in 2012, and the second was a home basketball game, as I commented earlier, which I believe was on December 11th, 2012.
Okay. Amy, is that, would you view that as fairly typical? Are those results still valid, being that it's 2015?
Yes.
Okay. By the numbers, is a right turn lane warranted at Ithan?
I did not conduct any of the investigations that the previous speaker represented. I believe that it is warranted both under existing conditions and as well as future conditions. I would point out for the 50th or 60th time that the future conditions assume that all of the traffic is moving. And if a more realistic assumption were put in place, the 23 right-turning vehicles during the future AM peak hour, which I'm pretty confident would not trigger the warrant, would probably cut down in half. And the 92 or 93 vehicles, which are currently predicted during the PM peak hour, if they were adjusted to reflect what's going to be the real condition, would also cut in half. And I believe in both cases, the warrant would not be triggered.
Do we know, do you have a plan, does the university have a plan for signage as far as directing people? And I'm talking about non-peak events. I've already stated very clearly that we're going to be looking for an events management plan that includes ITS, includes advance warning, some of the stuff you already employ, but we're looking at additional stuff. We want this brought up into the modern age, so it's really state-of-the-art and can attempt to influence even those motorists that don't necessarily abide by signs, hopefully in conjunction with the Radnor Police Department. But during off-peak hours, what signage will direct motorists to access the garage, not at Ithan, but at the other driveway access where there is a right turn lane facility?
Well, I can say that your concern was shared by the township traffic engineer and the township, and the university is working on a very detailed special events management plan. I did not prepare that study, so I really can't comment exactly on the different elements, including off-peak directional signage and other wayfinding materials. I don't know if anyone from the university could better address your...
Yeah, there was a detailed special event plan that was submitted, and we reviewed it. We're still working through some of the messaging boards that are being used, the length of the messages, the heights of the
So we
lettering.
put together an events management plan as requested during the project and worked with Radnor Township. It's not 100%, complete. We still are going to end up hiring someone to do signage and wayfinding for us. We've shown areas where we're showing signs for different, parking lots and naming them and, how to get to different events. So we put together, I believe it was homecoming, graduation, move in, move out, a night basketball game, and weekend events. And came up with a different plan for each scenario and worked with the township and submitted as part of the preliminary land development to be reviewed.
I take it we have not seen that plan?
You have not seen the plan.
Okay. I've been told I can gauge the audience. Would the audience prefer PennDOT to take a look at that plan as well? Absolutely. Okay. Then I would ask that we also have that plan shared with us.
No problem.
I
Thank you very
assumed it
much.
was being submitted with the HOP eventually.
Right, which-
That's,
And that very well may be. So
At this point, we only
Yeah.
submitted what was required. I'm sorry. At this point, we only submitted for preliminary land development, and we haven't submitted anything to PennDOT for that.
Okay. I have one last question for Frank.
Okay.
And obviously, Amy, you can confirm this. How much traffic did you project? How much did you project the traffic to increase with this? We understand Villanova's goal and intention here. They believe this will reduce traffic, but Radnor Township and supported by PennDOT said that we're not going to accept that assumption. We'll see what happens when and if this goes through, but in the meantime, we want to take a more conservative approach. Can you give us an estimate of approximately how much did you show an increase? I mean, I heard talk about, the student cars sitting in there. And did you factor in some of those cars moving as opposed to what you think will happen with them not moving?
There's essentially two answers to that question. The first is, the whole project looked at the way existing parking spaces turn over today and then held that constant in the future condition. So if you look at the trip generation rate on a per parking space basis, which is essentially what this study's focused on, because as some of you probably already heard last night and at other meetings, the total number of parking spaces on campus is 5,130 spaces. It's not increasing or decreasing. However, it is radically changing in terms of where it's located. There's presently almost 1,200 spaces in the southwest corner of the intersection of Lancaster and Ithan today in main lot. That's going to reduce to 80. That's obviously going to have some influence on the right turn volume, but again, since we had the Pike garage added, and that Pike lot is 577 spaces today and increases to 1,289, we kept all 1,289 spaces active. The total combined parking spaces pre-condition and post-condition south of Lancaster actually dropped 500 spaces, but we kept all those spaces still active. During the peak hours, if I recall correctly, and I don't want to pull out my 527-page study, but I think during peak hours, there's one trip for every 3 spaces approximately. Some traffic arrives before and after the peak hour. Not everyone comes exactly the same time. So if you have 1,100 students that are going to be commuting, that are currently commuting and won't be commuting in the future, that translates to an ad hoc addition of about 400 trips that were left in the network. If you divide that by, say, 3, you have 1,200 divided by 3. So that's the first component. The second component is the retail space, which is really going to be Villanova-centric and is largely, perhaps even entirely during certain periods, going to be internal trips, pedestrian-based internal trips. The study does include some external trip generation during both peak hours. This was requested by the township, so that was also factored into the study.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a question.
For those of you who came in late, we're going to be limiting all comments now to 5 minutes, and there will be people who will be coming around the audience with microphones, and I'll just call on you by the names of people who signed up. And if you would just raise your hand, the first 2 people will be Sarah Pilling and Randy Mouse. So Sarah and Randy, would you raise your hand so the next person can have a mic for you? Okay, thank you.
Sarah Pilling, and I live on Garrett Avenue, and I'm 2 long blocks from the corner of Lancaster and Ithan Avenue. In the beginning, when Villanova made its first presentation, they said they were going to get all the students out of the neighborhoods. But in truth, because some of their doubles had become triples, I believe, if I remember correctly, they were going to reduce triples to doubles, and that would make between 300 and 350 beds for current students, down the pike, who would be living. So I believe I remember they're saying that ultimately 875 students still would not be able to live on campus and would be therefore commuting. So how are they going to get to campus, and where are they going to park, and how is, let's say, 80% of them drive, because I live on Garrett Avenue where we have students and they rarely walk, they usually drive. Where are they going to park, and how is that going to affect the intersection of Lancaster and South Ithan Avenue?
That's it.
I believe that question would be directed at the engineer.
You want him to answer it, or shall I just make him rhetorical?
He is welcome to answer it.
I think Mr. Haney has suggested that the traffic manager answer that question, if he could, please. I will trust you to clarify for us.
And I'm sorry, I might not have caught all of the question, but essentially, you may recall one of the design elements of the project is what's called the West Lancaster lot, which is a surplus. That lot will represent a surplus over the existing small parking lots that currently exist, and that surplus was added to that area in an attempt, as requested by the township, to lower the height of the Pike Garage. So I think there's approximately 300-plus spaces there. It's the intent that those spaces will not only serve the existing components of those smaller buildings, but also some currently commuting faculty and staff. And I think that was part of your question, is how will these people actually get these commuters? Mary Lou's going to...
Sorry. West Lancaster Avenue is will be designated for the commuter, the leftover commuters that are coming to school. We're going to try to get staff and faculty all on campus, and then in the garage, we are saying warehousing. What we mean is that they will be, that's where the students in the residence hall will park. We understand that they will leave that garage once a day, twice a day, but not at peak hours. That's what we've been trying to say. So the remainder, and we have done studies from our West Campus development of how many students actually come with cars. And the number we have come to is about 600 students of this 1,135. So we are planning on the top 2 levels being for student parking. They will have to swipe in and swipe out. So they will be on the top 2 levels. The other 80 will be parked in South Campus lot, which we have plenty of spaces available. And then the remainder of those levels will be for visitors and events. And the idea is to keep it open so that our events, we can put 750 cars or 700 cars in during an event time. With the wayfinding that we're going to do and the event management, we plan to have signage so that, and we're actually looking into working on an app so that when people are coming to an event at Villanova, they know where they're parking. They will have designated parking. Right now, they don't have that. They go and they go to 2 gigantic parking lots, and it's a free-for-all. And when they get there, they're full. So what we're trying to do is plan for the fact that we are now moving parking. We're putting parking in different spots on the campus. Because in the future, after the first year of opening, people aren't going to go to main lot anymore because there's not going to be any parking. So they're going to have to figure out a different spot on campus to go park. And it's our job to designate that parking for them. And that's the idea that we'll do. You'll use for basketball events, season ticket holders will have areas to go park. Right now, they don't have areas to go park. They go park on Main Lot and Pike because it's available. So we do have a plan, and we are working towards solidifying that plan. We're looking at all kinds of options. We're hiring a parking management group. We've hired a parking management group. Now we're hiring someone to work with us on the garage and how to disperse tags and licenses.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you.
Randy? He'll be followed by Tony Bailey. Tony, would you raise your hand?
It doesn't matter to me.
Just please stand up in place, and we'll hold the microphones for you. Thanks.
I'm Randy Maude. I live in Aldwin Lane. I'm about a block from the campus. And I think my basic questions here are, the assumption has been made that we're going to be able to load a parking lot, several multi-story parking lot, with passes or some sort of credential at the same pace as we currently load 2 surface lots that have 3 entrances. I think we really need to look at that assumption and see what are the waiting times going to be, and where is this storage capacity going to reside. Late in this conversation, as things have evolved, we've gotten to a point of saying now we're going to load roughly 700 cars, pick your number, into a parking lot. And how long is that going to take? And I'm not sure whether this is all peak hour or over what duration you want to do it, but I'm having a great deal of difficulty rationalizing that number with 90 cars per hour turning currently from Lancaster, eastbound on Lancaster, into Ithan. Those numbers don't jive. Now, there were some maps done by the simulations that had some initials on them. It appeared as if there was a continuation of Ithan Avenue, of Aldwin Lane that came through and crossed Ithan and somehow went up behind the Performing Arts Center. And there was a bunch of loading that was happening back in there, and I was kind of confused as to what that was. Some of it arguably was related to storage capacity for the garage, but I think we really need to look closely at what the assumptions are for the delay in getting into this parking garage and storage capacity. Second comment, I'm wondering if the university is saying that the West Lancaster parking area that they're proposing here for commuting students is going to have overnight parking in it. So it's a specific question because it deals with, really, my house backs up to that parking lot. Oh dear. See if I can find my notes. I want to ask about the question of Aldwin Lane and Lancaster Avenue specifically. In this case, when I drove here tonight at 6 o'clock, I was the 10th car in line to turn left in this case, which the vast majority of traffic does, from Aldwin Lane onto Lancaster Avenue. It took 2 traffic light cycles to get through, which is roughly 4 minutes of sitting there. During that time, I watched on each cycle 2 or 3 cars run the yellow light to turn onto Lancaster Avenue. It's an ongoing issue. I've watched it day in and day out, literally. People make the assumption that they can clear that stop sign or that stoplight, and it's not happening. A second piece of the puzzle deals with the event management question. It appears to me, having lived in the area for 30-plus years, that the university has, periodically anyway, directed traffic specifically to turn down Aldwin Lane, particularly from South Campus, to avoid Lancaster Avenue. During the student move-in this fall, traffic was backed up past my house, which is past the stop sign that even would lead to Lancaster Avenue. That's easily 800 feet of traffic that was backed up on Aldwin Lane. And literally, I couldn't get out of the driveway at the time. Another question has to do with the traffic, pedestrian traffic, to cross Lancaster Avenue at the Aldwin Lane and Lancaster intersection. As currently configured, we have to we have to cross at the same time as 320 is moving, which means in practical terms, people coming down the hill are frustrated because they're looking at a pedestrian trying to get across the road. People who are coming up north on Spring Mill on 320 and turning right basically have a tendency to try to run you over as it's currently set up. So instead of doing what you would typically do, which would walk, this is how it used to be set up, you walked across Lancaster Avenue when Aldwin Lane was turned, when the light was turned. You now do that when the 320 light is turned. It's dangerous, is what I'm trying to reflect to you. Thank you.
Tony Bailey. After Tony is Christina Perone.
I just want to say one thing. I had exactly the same concern with the loading in the parking lot, and he doesn't need to say anything now, but Frank can confirm that I asked him that same exact question. And I've asked him to modify his analysis and simulation to make a representation of the time it takes to, swipe that card and process the vehicles as a thorough double check, because I don't want to see this go wrong either. Okay? Thank you.
Hi, Tony Bailey. I live at 132 Barclayton in Garrett Hill. I'd just like to make a few comments. Most of what Rick Leonardi said, I concur with. The 1,135 students in this one location, along with retail. Most of what, we don't know what's going to be there right now, except the relocation of the bookstore. And when I think about this, I just envision traffic, and how I'm envisioning getting out of my own neighborhood. It also seems clear, according to the applicant, because we have requested or we've asked, will there be a cap on enrollment? As of today, there seems to be no proposed enrollment and cap on enrollment. Again, that seems to be a question for what our future student enrollment might look like. Again, creating more students, more traffic, more cars. Additionally, it was proposed to us, this project will be great. We'll get all these students out of your neighborhood, and that will bring students out of the neighborhood to this location, when in fact our own economists stated that it didn't get the students out of the neighborhood. There will still be that many students in the neighborhood now, along with the 1135. There is no regulation in terms of students having cars or not having cars. I understand that freshmen and sophomores may not have cars except under certain exceptions. So again, this is another car producing number. Again, suggesting that students are just going to warehouse their cars, then how do they get to work? How do they recreate? How do they, get around the neighborhood? To think that they're just going to warehouse their cars and that's going to be it is unrealistic. I think finally, using the findings of the DVRPC, I believe that the land bridge is in its proposed location is misplaced, and alternate location should be explored at this time. And I just want to stress, this isn't about opposition to the plan. This really, really is about the health and safety and welfare of not just the community, but the students. Thank you.
I don't have anything. Thank you.
Okay, Christina? Do you want to get?
A couple of things. I'm Christina Peroni, and I live in Wayne. I found the main fact of what Tony was talking about, that Villanova refuses to commit that they will not increase enrollment. So therefore, we shall assume that the 1,135 new beds will be 1,135 more students, which I did a quick calculation. I believe Villanova's cost of tuition is about $65,000 a year, so that's $71 million a year. And for this kind of money, I think we should get a right turn lane. I think we should get, and I would, Mr. Haney, it would be great if you could explore the idea of a tunnel. Every time I drive through there, I am terrified. There are all these young, happy, energetic students, and there are cars everywhere, and it's just scary. And I know the lanes are small, so the lanes are extra small. That simulation I saw, I have never seen Villanova that cars moving like that. I found that like hysterical because I've never, except at midnight maybe, it doesn't look like that. That was, I don't know where those numbers came from, but I trust that Amy was hopefully making sure that those numbers were realistic, but I don't know where they came from because that does not look like that ever. So would, Mr. Haney, you consider requesting a tunnel? Just get those kids off the streets, protect those children. Right now, they are considering putting the crosswalk on Church. That's not where the kids are. The kids are at Ithan. I don't know where that came from. I don't know if that was a request from the church to put it there so that on Sunday the people, I don't know how that happened, but I know the studies, and Commissioner Fisher said the studies were there are more students at Ithan than any other place crossing. So why wouldn't you have the pedestrian crossing or a tunnel put there? That's one question. The next point I'd like to address is, will Villanova commit to limiting enrollment? Will they do it? Say yes or no, in which case we should assume this entire premise of we are making your community so much better is nonsense. Lastly, the political point that Mr. Commissioner Fisher made, it wasn't about you, Mr. Haney, about PennDOT. It was about our commissioners. We have 4 commissioners, Higgins, Spengler, Nagel, and Curley, who have blindly accepted everything that—
Excuse me, Christina, we're going to stick to the vehicles. Okay.
I'll bring it around. Give me 2 seconds. The traffic engineers in our township has said, be careful, don't do this, require this, require this, require this, require this. And these 4 commissioners have said yes to everything Villanova wants, even though our officials who are reviewing these plans have said no, don't accept it. So it's not your politics, Mr. Haney. I am just so grateful that this is, in my opinion, government at its best. Your job is to look out for all of us, including the applicant, because I have been an applicant for PennDOT. I have come to you, and you guys made me do a turning lane, and you made me widen a street, and you made me put in new lights. So, and I was a 37,000 square foot building. I was a baby in the whole scheme of this. So I would just be grateful for your objectivity. I am so grateful you're answering questions and asking questions. It's so refreshing for us because we have not had this venue at all. So thank you.
Jim Yiannopoulos, followed by Rich Booker.
First of all, thank you for being here tonight, and we appreciate the chance to be heard. Concerns about the impact of this project on traffic have been a major factor each time either the Radnor Township Planning Commission or the Delaware County Planning Department have reviewed various versions. The Township Planning Commission has rejected and sent at least 4, perhaps 5 versions back. It has never been given their stamp of approval. The Delaware County Planning Department has also found it lacking at least 3 times. Unfortunately, as some others have referred to, 4 of our 7 commissioners have chosen to ignore the recommendations of these 2 bodies and overrule them and move it forward. So we're hoping that PennDOT will provide a fair and impartial review. I was interested to hear you say a little earlier tonight, Mr. Haney, that nobody's pretending there will be no increase in traffic. When the university originally began promoting this project, they suggested that it would remove students from our neighborhoods and reduce traffic. Since then, as some others have referred to, their own hired experts concluded that students who move out of our neighborhoods to live in the new dorms will be replaced in our neighborhoods by students who currently live further away, who would mostly drive to campus. So, more recently, they have claimed there would be no impact. To believe that, you would have to believe that all the students in the proposed dorms would use the proposed pedestrian bridge over Lancaster Avenue at Church Walk. It doesn't seem sensible. They wouldn't. It's common sense that the 50% who live closer to Ithan Avenue would use the existing crosswalks at Ithan and Lancaster. That's at least an additional 550 students crossing Lancaster Avenue multiple times per day. The traffic impact of that would be enormous. The only way for these additional 550 students to have no impact would be if a second bridge were also proposed from the southwest corner of Ithan and Lancaster to the northwest corner. As others have mentioned, it's also noteworthy that nothing in this proposal prevents Villanova from increasing their student body in the future. We have requested they consider a cap on enrollment because we recognize that no admissions office can precisely predict how many students will accept offers of admission. We have suggested that this could be a soft cap of, say, no more than 5% increase over the current enrollment. Each time the university has rejected this request, an increase of 20 or 30% in student enrollment would have disastrous repercussions for traffic.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Your comments are very relevant. I guess I have a couple of questions, not necessarily of you, but of the university. I would put this to them. PennDOT, obviously, we have no comment on their enrollment. That is entirely up to them. However, should it increase dramatically, there is the potential there to have some impact on traffic. I don't know what their plans are. I would ask them to perhaps expound on the increase in capacity, if there is any, of the actual university itself, because an enrollment increase would also have to be accompanied by an increase in faculty, facilities, classrooms, a number of other things that would support that increase in enrollment. So I would put that to them to respond to you, to try to give you some sense of what the reality is of such an increase, because to add that number of classrooms and other facilities to support that increase, that's not going to happen overnight. So if they do have a plan that would foreshadow something like that, then I believe you have a legitimate concern. But I would leave that them to address that. One question I do have for them right now is to explain the theory of the pedestrian management and the location of the bridge as it is right now, proposed at Church Walk, because that seems to be coming up again and again.
So Mr. Kowalski of the university will help me if I don't capture everything. I didn't come prepared to recap the pedestrian bridge discussion from the better part of a year ago, but essentially some of the concerns were whether or not pedestrians would actually use the bridge. And knowing that, for example, at Ithan Avenue, the grades are essentially flat, there would be a good bit of work involved by anyone using the bridge to have to go up and down the steps. So we looked to see if there was any other location that was more conducive to the grades as well as to the destination of the students, which are classrooms. And there was an analysis of the campus and a determination, I believe it was 70 or 75% of classrooms are actually essentially west and northwest of Church Walk. We know that the Lancaster Avenue housing project basically is from Church Walk out to Ithan Avenue, and if the students are going to be going in the northwesterly direction anyway, and the shortest path would be to connect them in the Church Walk vicinity, and the grades happen to be favorable because Church Walk, as it's named, has a very long flight of steps on the north side of Lancaster Avenue, the thought was maybe a pedestrian bridge that connects where the students already wind up on the north side at the top of those steps with the existing Route 100 staircase to the south, and a new staircase that serves the community that's proposed would be the most logical choice for the pedestrian bridge. We also did extensive pedestrian counts, which are chronicled in Appendix D of the TIS. We do know that there is substantial pedestrian activity at Church Walk today, and that will continue in the future. And there's also some substantial activity at Ithan as well. But anyone who would suggest that there's consistently greater activity at Ithan versus at Church Walk hasn't looked at the numbers or been to the campus lately, because there is a lot of activity at Church Walk.
Just a couple of points to add to that. The bridge where it's located now would also be conducive as the closest point of access to campus for those parking in the surface lot, the West Lancaster surface lot that we're proposing as well for our commuting students. And we're also under the impression that we would not be able to eliminate the at-grade crossing at Ithan Avenue no matter what was built there. And so we would not be able to prevent those at-grade crossings. The topography of that intersection means that you'd have to go up on both sides or down on both sides. And given the opportunity, pedestrians would likely take the path of least resistance, which would be to continue to cross at grade. And so for that reason, where the bridge can come in at level with the Church Plaza, capturing many of the students coming over from South Campus already crossing and staying above, already crossing their 100 tracks, we believe that this is a well-positioned site. And I believe actually the DVR-PC, when they were presenting here, their report validated the location of the bridge as it was.
Thank you.
Mr. Booker?
I'll just put mine on top.
I'm sorry, Mr. Booker, was not aware you were doing a presentation, so thank you.
This goes with my 5 minutes.
Okay.
Am I not allowed?
After Mr. Booker, we'll hear from Amy and, I believe, Lulio.
Actually, Rich Booker, Belrose Lane, I'm about quarter mile, I guess, from the location. I'm actually the commissioner for 2nd Ward. So Commissioner Fisher and Commissioner Booker and Representative Mr. Vitale, did he leave? I don't see him. Okay. My view, so what I have here for you is a picture about from last year. This is just from December, and this is at the evening of a nearby intersection. And it's tough to see here, but you can see the lights in the car. So this is Lancaster Avenue at King of Prussia Road. And this is actually closer to my house, but it's just down the road from the subject location. And this is typical of what we see at the locations in question. And what I would say for my part of this is, my biggest concern is not just Ithan Avenue and Lancaster Avenue, but also Route 320 and Lancaster Avenue and King of Prussia Road at 320. All of these tie together. And even right now, so you can't see it, but this is my traffic app, and you can see red, even at 8:43, there's a traffic backups right now at Lancaster and Ithan, also at 320 and Lancaster, and also at King of Prussia Road. Even right now at 8:40. So during the peak hours, it's particularly bad. Now, I must admit, I don't hit it that much. I leave at 7:30 in the morning. I come back at 7:30, 8 o'clock at night. I avoid the area. But my constituents, as you've heard tonight, are particularly concerned by all the traffic. And again, it's not just the traffic at Villanova, which is in my ward. It's that whole corridor. Really, it goes from County Line Road to further west than that. The biggest point I think that can be made here is our traffic engineer recommended a right turn at Ithan. I think it's appropriate. I think that we should be able to do that with this project, this $200 or $300 million project. And I think that it certainly won't hurt the traffic. My bet is it will help, as Amy Kaminsky and Commissioner Fisher have alluded to. It won't hurt. I think it's worth it. On balance, when considering additional people walking a few extra seconds and the right turn lane, I think it'll be beneficial. I hope that we can get PennDOT to support us with that. Again, the biggest concern for me actually is the Sproul Road. It's Route 320 in Lancaster. That has been our worst intersection. You can't come down the hill and get onto the Blue Route. So my constituents that are in Hilldale and Ashwood Road and coming from near the law school can't make it. It can take 3 or 4 cycles of the light to make a right turn onto Lancaster Avenue. A terrible condition has been my experience. And also I wanted to remind our guest about the other development, which is right at the intersection that's depicted here, the biomed facility, which unbelievably to me was approved preliminarily last night. But this biomed site will bring 500 to 600 new trips, 500 to 600 trips, new trips in peak hour, on peak AM and PM. That combined with 1,145-bed dorm room and expansion of what we see here is going to be particularly difficult with an already, as documented here by my traffic app, problematic area of Lancaster Avenue. So appreciate your being here and appreciate the folks coming out. And also just to echo the sentiments of some of our other constituents here, in Radnor, we have seen the politicians actually do call and say, we want to see something. So we have seen this, and we have seen problems with what often is viewed as excessive use of influence. So again, we're glad to see you here. We want to have a fair and open debate about this, and we appreciate everyone's time to come out and talk about
Thank you,
this.
Mr. Booker, and I'd like to remind people again that we're sticking to vehicular traffic and pedestrian traffic.
That's what I was talking about.
I understand. Thank you. And now it's Lulio and Amy. Amy, I believe, is first. Amy Wishner.
Hi, I'm Amy Wishner. I live at 15 Braxton Road. So Villanova University is between where I live and the Blue Route. And I use the...
Hold the mic a little closer, please. Thank you.
I use the Blue Route to commute to work. And my general comments, I mean, a lot of my comments, my thoughts have been made by other people, so there's just a few things I want to add. One is that I really want you to, and I know this is part of what you bring to this, to be very, very realistic as opposed to based in some fantasy about what's going on. So one is my experience with peak, what people are talking about is peak, i.e. maximum traffic, goes from about 7 till about 10 in the morning and starts at about 3 p.m. and goes till about 7 p.m. Those are times where traffic is blocked, and I have to wait through multiple cycles of lights to get from my house to the Blue Route or back the other way. I appreciate what you're saying about being sensitive to the need for flexibility. And again, that's another area where I hope you'll be very realistic, because we can imagine, oh yeah, we can have all this flexibility, but if there's not some way that Villanova is sort of set up to make that flexibility a reality, it doesn't do us any good. But I'm glad to hear that you're sensitive to the need for, the different seasons, different days of the week, different hours of the day. There are very different numbers of pedestrians, for example. I have not heard anything about bicycles, and my sort of general kind of understanding is that any time in this day and age, and especially around a student, population, where we're talking about new construction or new, lanes, that we want to be setting up, excuse me, we want to be setting up routes for bicycles where bicycles are separate from pedestrians and from vehicular traffic. So if we're talking about doing that, and I think all of us certainly want to encourage, greater use of bicycles as well as recognizing that this is a perfect population to do it, we should be including that. And I haven't heard, and that's also kind of a question, what is your role in regard to that? And also kind of a question, what is your role in regard to making sure that pedestrians are, sort of adequately thought of, in addition to just where do they cross? For example, there's been one of the ongoing issues between the community and Villanova has been the setback, where they keep wanting to shove the buildings like closer and closer to the road, meaning sort of sidewalks at a minimum, and also meaning that visibility is minimized. And I think all of us who live in the area, and I know other speakers have referred to this, have had the experience of having students run across the road, and especially at dusk where, it can be particularly difficult, and we're very concerned about that. So I don't know if any part of what your role is involved with looking at the sidewalk configuration and how that would relate to visibility and pedestrian safety. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm glad you asked that question. Yeah, I agree with you, the peak hours. I mean, let's face it, we've grown over the last 50 years. And, in some ways it's very unfortunate. We did not have the level of planning 40, 50 years ago that we do now. And it's unfortunate because I think we'd have a heck of a better world if we did. If we did what we do today, back in 1970, the world would be a completely different place. But it just wasn't on people's radar back then. And all of a sudden, we're getting overwhelmed with all this growth. Well, I can't make Villanova fix all the existing problems. I had explained that before. 320, 5 points, we know that that's a concern. We know that it backs up. We know that there's a lot of congestion out here. DVRPC did do a study, which, by the way, we were involved with, that looked at the entire corridor. And they make some recommendations, some near-term, mid-term, long-term recommendations. It takes money, but at least there's a framework out there, and there's goals that have been identified that we can work towards. Now, can I get Villanova to do, fill in some of those gaps? Perhaps. And, we're working through that now with the review process. But so yeah, reality versus fantasy. Yeah, you're absolutely spot on with that comment. Bicycles. PennDOT's role in multimodal reviews. We switched about sometime within the last decade to being an all-vehicle, all-transportation agency to being, there's multimodal and it's important. And we need to account for all modes, and we need to think about pedestrians. We need to think about transit. We need to think about bicyclists, walkers, the whole gamut. So what our role here is simply to, number one, have knowledge of what their proposal is for the management of these other modes, review the ADA compliance of these other modes, which we do. By the way, I'm also the ADA coordinator, so I wear a number of different hats here. I'm in charge of the speed limits, but I can never raise them, trust me. We may give them credit. You may not like this, but when they provide, any developer, provides access to transit, access to bicycle facilities, trails, that sort of thing. They now can get a credit reduction in their trip generation calculations because they can take and it's a very small percentage, but they can take a percentage credit for reducing the number of vehicular trips because they have provided these other facilities. That's PennDOT's way of trying to encourage multimodalism through incentivization. We're certainly looking at that with this particular project. And by the way, I think I mentioned before that PennDOT gave Villanova a grant for the pedestrian bridge. So we are invested in accommodating multiple modes. One last thing on the idea of a tunnel. While we're open to considering anything like that, we have permitted like golf tunnels and some other types of facilities. What we have found with tunnels is that there can be security issues, lighting issues, people are hesitant to use them, that sort of thing. Just as a pedestrian bridge would not be heavily utilized if it's placed in the wrong location. So we're keenly aware of these nuances of these types of facilities, and it's my opinion that we're not looking to invest the grant money in a facility that we would view as failing. So when the university presented their proposal for the bridge to us, they went through the topography. They went through the pedestrian accessibility to the bridge itself. Because, we sat here just like you and said, you know what, convince us. We're not buying this. We know that people won't climb upstairs to use a pedestrian bridge. What are you doing to make that more usable, more accessible? And they came back and explained that to us. And apparently it was good enough. They got the grant. So yes, we do play a role in those other things. And, one of the things I'm most concerned with about this right turn lane is by the way, it will have an impact because everybody's saying a few seconds. No, it's like 7 seconds every single time the light changes, okay? Unless we can address it with perhaps not having that pedestrian scramble all the time, because you're right, we don't need it in the middle of the night. Maybe there is a different way to phase this thing. Problem is, when we do need it, it also coincides with the peak hours of the roadway. So yeah, all right, we don't have it at night, but we don't have the problem at night. So I'm not sure we're getting anywhere with that. So, I hope that I'm conveying to you folks that we are looking at all these things. We share your concerns, and I've heard great, wonderful comments tonight. I've asked some of those same questions myself, but I am also learning from you. So thank you. Please keep it up.
All right, Leslie? Can you wait till the microphone comes to you? Hold on.
Hi, Leslie Morgan. I live on the other end of town from Villanova, and one of the first things that I saw when this township knew, and the Board of Commissioners fully knew, that the three largest developments in their species, if you will, were going to be entered at the same time, did nothing to get you here. I had suggested it, many people had suggested it, so welcome, and I hope it won't be your last. And maybe we could get your, how do I say this? Since 476, one of my questions was, since 476 is a federal highway, and it is impacted by the two huge developments, could we find a way to contact them and they come and speak to us? Because we think that it impacts the entrance and exit ramps of 476, obviously. And it's a very important thing. Especially they're going to be under construction at the same time. So that was one of my questions. The second question and maybe you don't have an answer to that right now, but the other area, since it's a regional concern, I think, on both sides of the Wayne side of town and then the Bryn Mawr side of town, that we're building basically what we call a Chinese wall. People just won't go over to Bryn Mawr from Wayne anymore. It'll be just too much effort because we're at a failure mode now, in essence, from community fatigue, which includes the roads, okay? But when does it trip to not returning and the economic problems for your retailers, of whether it be the town of Wayne, the town of Bryn Mawr, already looks a little tired, you guys. And I think it is definitely a function of the traffic. So I pose that to you. I look at a much more regional overview than just Villanova or just what they're now calling Radnor Park. Everybody's calling Biomed, but they've renamed it. It's called Radnor Park now, okay? So it's Radnor Park. And the last thing that I wanted to know is, could you speak to us, after I talk, about how PennDOT views failure intersections already? We have several what we've been told are failures or near failures. And so I develop in Delaware, and when you have a failed intersection, you get so many no's, you sometimes don't even get your project approved. And with Villanova and Biomed, I'm not a partisan person, but what happened there was the township actually stepped in and designed density increasing zoning changes for those specific sites. So we brought this on a lot ourselves, unfortunately. I don't know why. The Villanova had a by right situation to put their dorms there. But what we did was show them a path by spot zoning, basically, of increasing the density about 350%. We wrote a whole new zoning code called CICD. They always could build the dorms there, like we see on the West Campus. Thank you so much.
As far as FHWA being engaged, they typically don't get involved in anything until it's actually on the main line, or you have a little bit of a clue there. If it significantly affects the ramps such that it would cause a backup to extend past the gore point between the ramp and the main line. That's when they kind of raise their eyebrows and they start saying, hey, what's going on, that sort of thing. Or anything that would directly affect the highway, say we were modifying a ramp or something like that. But, I mean, certainly, they have a Philadelphia office. They have staff here that certainly would be open if you or the township or anyone else made an inquiry. I can't speak for them as to whether they would come out or not. But, yeah, there are officials. I have met them. They do exist. And they're not just in Washington. They are around here. Yes, yes. As far as congestion causing economic pain, yeah, that is a real factor. That is a real factor. I had mentioned a minute ago in my lamentation about 50 years of bad planning. Well, hindsight's 20/20. But you're right. That effect is happening today. I can tell you, and I think everyone in this room, if I asked you to gauge your opinion, you'd probably agree with me. If some place is full of traffic, you really don't feel like driving there, do you? I mean, it's hard to go to Philadelphia to go to a sports game or something like that. Just to get to the city, I want to go to the shore, I have to go through Philadelphia, and I dread it. Not because Philadelphia, I grew up there. I understand that. It's just trying to get through that traffic. Now, what do we do about it? I don't know. We'll have Villanova fix it all. Don't worry about it. No, I'm kidding you. I'm kidding you. And I apologize. That's a little wise guy. But as far as failing intersections, you also asked that question. I explained earlier that when a project is proposed, their responsibility is to return the roadway conditions to a level that is equal to or better than that existed before their project. So if, and this is just the unfortunate truth, this is our laws in the state of Pennsylvania, if a project comes in at an intersection that is failing and they can do whatever X improvements are to keep that intersection at that same level of failing, with considerations to safety and operations and multimodal facilities and that sort of thing, I cannot hold them to more than that. I cannot make them take an F and make it an A. Regulatorily, legally, I cannot do that. But I can make sure that they don't make that F any worse. And what you do find oftentimes is that it's not an equal sum game. Typically, when an intersection needs an improvement and they make that improvement, it actually does get a little bit better. Some of the intersections here may experience that. Not all of them. I would have to go into the study to give you specific answers on each one. And bear in mind, that's only what they've presented to us right now. We are still reviewing it, and we have not reached any conclusions. As far as the spot zoning, that would be the township. I can't comment on that. Thank you.
Thank you. We have our last two people that I have here signed up are Greg Snyder and Bob Escrow. Would you put your hands up? Okay.
Good evening, and thank you again for coming out. My name is Bob Escrow. I live on 46 Ithan Avenue. I'm on the corner of Aldwin. I'm on the corner of Aldwin and Ithan. So I actually have two sides that border Villanova. And I just wanted to point out, I hear a lot of talk about Lancaster Avenue, and I really agree with those comments. But being on Ithan and Aldwin, I see the backup coming from that intersection down, going south on Ithan. And in the morning, you can see it building up more and more. The next point I wanted to make was, if you could please, and I mentioned this to the university, there's a crosswalk, and that will be impacted as well because cars have to stop at the crosswalk to let students pass, and then they go further up. So the whole methodology of going north on Ithan, hitting that crosswalk, coming to the intersection, really backs up. And what I wanted to mention too was earlier the Villanova had proposed, and I don't know if it's still on the table or not, but adding a stop sign on Ithan going north, and maybe they can address that. And when I heard that a year and a half ago, I fell on the floor, and it still makes me sick because you'd be going north on Ithan, stop at the crosswalk, you'd go further, you see this great green light, but yet you have to stop at a stop sign. And again, it could be in the middle of the night, and now you then have to stop at that traffic light. So as a local resident, it doesn't make sense to me. I understand from their point of view, at least back then, that they were trying to get cars off of Lancaster and get them into the parking garage quicker. And that's what the stop sign would enable them to do. But
Can you clarify where this stop sign is? Exactly. This is on Ithan internal?
It's been eliminated from the plan. It's no longer in the plan.
Oh, okay. Well, if that's true, then great. I appreciate it now. I feel much better. I think that's about all that I have. I really wasn't prepared, but give me 1 second. Signage. Signage not just for special events and not consider special events only. I have a lot of cars that turn around in my driveway. Uber drives, those folks turn around in my driveway all the time because they have no idea where they're going. Yesterday, I had somebody turn around. I said to them, "Are you lost?" And they said, "Yeah, I'm looking for admissions. I don't know where admissions is." So I just pointed up at the university. So signage from a day-to-day perspective would be very valuable. Okay, thank you.
I believe the university has stated that they are doing a wayfinding sign. I don't know if you want to expand on that, or you've already said it. Go ahead. No? Okay. Thank you.
I believe the staff has also notified me that they would like to speak for a few moments, so I'd like to give them the opportunity to address the public and also if we have further questions.
Thank you. So just very quickly, I know it's late, just to give a little background and a little history on the project. So Villanova came in, it was a couple of years ago, and staff is usually myself, our appointed traffic engineer, oftentimes members of our traffic safety unit, Officer Mattis, amongst others. So way back, we work for you, and we very much knew your concerns. We live them every day, just as you did. So we took a very conservative approach with the applicant. We made sure that the depth and breadth of what we did was very comprehensive. That's why, as Mr. Devaney said, they had 17 intersections to study. That was our list that they had to do. Mr. Devaney and I had that conversation on a reduction in traffic as part of that project. I guess that was 3 years ago. So there's a lot of things that we've been bringing forth that we know the residents have been concerned with all along. We've met with the applicant like we would on any big project. We've met with the applicant and PennDOT. and we've met with PennDOT, and always putting forth all these items that really everything we've talked about tonight. We asked them to decentralize parking to a point, and they did. Maybe not all that we wanted. So we staff had been pushing for this right-hand turn lane, and we didn't see it really having much traction. So we did go see Fran Haney. He's been very good in meeting with the township and being very objective in what he does. And what Villanova proposed, offhand, wasn't a bad idea with the turning lane in front of the PAC. Thank you, Fran, for asking my question on that 120-second delay, because my concern was, and I think I speak for Officer Mattis, if at an event, if that 120 seconds is more, if that lane stacks back through the light, we have a problem. And maybe that's where, so although that's a good thing, maybe that right-hand turn lane is still a good thing. So we did meet with Fran one more time, and out of all this came his requirement of the applicant to do this modeling. And we said, you know, I was throwing up our points, Amy was there, we had all these concerns, and he said, well, let's model it, and we'll see. So they're gonna have to make some changes to the model. Last night at Planning Commission, as you know, so the project was approved with conditions and recommended approval to go to the board preliminary with conditions. Two of those conditions were traffic related. One was the radius at Ithan Avenue and Lancaster Avenue. The other was the right-hand turn lane. And they specifically directed me, this is a motion that was approved, Susan Stern's motion that was approved, that Steve Norsini bring the following memo to PennDOT. The Planning Commission strongly supports staff and neighbors' recommendations of a right-hand turn lane at the southwest corner of Lancaster Avenue and Ithan Avenue. So, Fran, what that was is the Planning Commission's purview is not PennDOT, but they wanted me to bring forth to you how strongly they felt about that. And so we do hear a lot, and we're always pushing for what our residents feel. We do. We work for you. PennDOT has been quite objective, but they've always been very helpful with us. So I want to thank Mrs. Long for, as the spearhead from the Friends to Preserve Radnor, to let us have this meeting here tonight. I'd like to thank Fran for coming. We meet with him all the time during the day, but we like to see him out at night also. And I think if I could, I'm going to cheat here and toss it over to Officer Mattis of our Staff Traffic Committee for one last comment.
Good evening, everybody. I am your statue that stands on the corner a lot during events at Villanova. A lot of you have probably seen me there. All along, the police department was in favor of the turning lane. Number one, the size of this project, the retail that's going to be on that corner that Villanova is going to build there, the addition to the current office building down the road at the Villanova Center that's going up, Biomed, and the Androssen development, which is 100-plus homes going in there. We felt that we have the opportunity to improve an intersection, and we felt that it would improve the situation with the traffic there. Secondly, I don't know if you're aware, Fran, Aldwin Lane runs parallel with Lancaster Avenue. We did a traffic count there. The daily traffic count is over 1,000 cars a day on that road. Now, a lot of it is residents, but there's a lot of cut through there, and I'm assuming they're cutting through there because of the backup on Lancaster Avenue. So a lot of that right turn lane movement is happening on Aldwood Lane to go down Ithan Avenue. Secondly, we feel by having this right turn lane during event time, the police department can better manage that turning movement on South Ithan Avenue.
Thank you, Officer Mattis. And, you know, just to thank you, Steve. And I certainly have met with these folks. And, you know, it's not always comfortable to sit in a room with 4 big police officers and have them, you know, disagree with you. So that's it's not always the best situation to be in. See that? I better stay out of Radnor, huh? But no. In response to their concerns, and just like I've tried to demonstrate tonight, I want to be fair. I want to be open-minded about this. I want to consider all the alternatives. When Villanova had made their proposal about the not doing the right turn lane at Ithan in favor of doing the right turn lane into the garage, and in so doing, presenting an alternative way of managing their event traffic, light bulbs went off. I mean, we really like the idea because it afforded them an opportunity to route traffic differently. Number one, they become through movements at the intersection. Number two, if the garage should happen to be full and people don't pay attention to the signs, the Officer Mattis and his compatriots can then simply route those folks back out Ithan Avenue and not into your neighborhoods, okay? I mean, they can literally cut them off. So that was something that seemed very appealing to us and seemed to make an awful lot of sense to us. We wouldn't be opposed to taking a look at the specific impact to the efficiency of the Ithan Avenue intersection should the pedestrian crosswalk timing be increased by the level it would need to be. We'd have to see a layout. We'd have to then do the analysis. The models would have to then be modified to reflect that additional timing, and then we'd have to take a look. And, in the interest of fairness, once again, balancing everything. Number one, now I'm making those pedestrians cross an even larger intersection, which, by the way, I can tell you in the city of Philadelphia, they're looking to decrease the crossings distances for every intersection. The way most planners are approaching this multimodalism is not increasing the width of roads. They're actually shrinking them. And PennDOT is often in the position of trying to put a reality check on that because, whether the planners like it or not, the cars are not going away. So we have to find that balance. So, we're certainly open to that sort of thing. And it is true. After our meetings, we did, in fact, go back and not conclude in any final way and say, hey, let's take another look at this. Frank Tavani sat in my office, and we talked about these models. We talked about what we would be looking for. He came in with the model. I then sent him back and said, Frank, what about the time it's taken these people to swipe their cards and be processed? Go back and add a node to that model to reflect that thing. So this is still a work in progress. What I would also suggest that Villanova and Radnor Township consider is some traffic calming elements to be placed in the neighborhoods to try to discourage. These are public roads. Unless there is going to be a police action closure of those roads, say during a special event period or something like that, the public is free to use them. That's why they're public roads. But can we possibly implement some low-cost traffic calming measures to at least keep the speeds under control, to maintain safety, and make, people don't like going over speed tables and things like that. After a while, they get tired of that kind of thing. So I would simply encourage a conversation about something like that. Thank you very much. One more thing. Is there situations, and this is more directed to Villanova and the police force, where there is more than one event going on at any one time, and have you accounted for that in any of the modeling or any of the traffic assumptions? I would first ask Villanova to try to respond to that, and then maybe a police observation, if you have any.
Yeah, most likely their peak event that we have the most problems with is the basketball games during the week at night when they have night school. There are occasions where they have multiple events, smaller ones, that we find out by asking the people that are crossing the street, what are you here for? And we find out there's a volleyball game or something else going on that we weren't aware of. There was more activity going on there. But it hasn't been a problem other than the basketball games or the big ones at night. And we are currently working with them now, planning for the upcoming graduation in May. And one of our big concerns is getting signs up now to just let the everyday public know that this is the east lot, this is the Pike lot, whatever they decide they want to name these lots, just to get people familiar when they're driving through town. On up North Spring Mill, the law school lot, there's nothing really out there right now, and we're working with them, and they're going to do something regarding that.
One of our other concerns is, that we've discussed internally, is the high school graduations, because oftentimes they're at night, and you'd be surprised, it's all full, and everybody's traveling there at rush hour. So, the graduation may be at 7, but to get your good seat, you got to be there at 6. And a lot of local high schools use that. It's a very nice setup with the hall and the parking. So that's another concern we have, because there is a slew of them at one time in June of all the local schools that go there.
My goddaughter had her graduation there 2 years ago, but thankfully it was during the day.
Do you want to open it up for any other? Yes.
Yeah, sure.
On concurrence, we've decided if someone has one or two other comments to make, we'll limit anything now to 2 minutes. But if you have anything else you want to say, speak now or forever hold your peace.
It's not forever. You can always contact us.
I guess with the comments I made earlier, it still raises a question for me. I suggested that there would be about 550 students or so that would live closer to Ithan Avenue than the pedestrian bridge. And so this is an open question, either to anyone in the township, you, Mr. Haney, if you're aware in your discussions with Mr. Tavani or others at Villanova, how have those 550 or so pedestrian students that would live closer to Ithan than the pedestrian bridge, how have they been accounted for, if at all, in the studies?
I would have to direct that question to Villanova.
So I think just to restate the question is, does the traffic study reflect pedestrian activity in the proposed condition reflective of how it exists today? Could you restate the question just so I'm sure I understand?
I've suggested that with 1,100 students plus, about 550 of them would live closer to Ithan Avenue than the pedestrian bridge. Have they been accounted for in pedestrian traffic and crossings, or have you assumed that even though they would live closer to Ithan Avenue, that they would somehow magically go across the pedestrian bridge?
Thank you. The short answer is the pedestrian volumes were kept the same and included, in fact, in the future conditions as the existing conditions. And the 1,100 number, coincidentally, of the number of residents and the 550 that you split up, keep in mind that there's 1,149 parking spaces in that same area today. So in existing conditions, there are commuters that go to that lot and fill up those spaces. And that lot, I wish I could turn on the camera and put my phone down, you could see it, but you well know that that lot goes from Church Walk all the way to Ithan. So there's probably 550 spaces that are closer to Ithan than there are to Church Walk. So remarkably, if your theory holds true, there's going to be similar activity in terms of pedestrians related to the people that will live there and cross the street versus people who are currently commuting to those spaces now and crossing the street. Again, we think that the pedestrian bridge will actually create an incentive for more people to go and cross there as opposed to Ithan, because even though there is a scramble phase, the pedestrians still need to wait for traffic to stop to cross at Ithan. So since they can now cross by spanning Lancaster Avenue whenever they wish, there might be some greater incentive for people who are more in the middle of the site to actually go to the west as opposed to go to the east, especially if their destination is to the west to begin with.
You had noted that in your, you performed a pedestrian analysis of, where they're coming from versus where their classes were. And if I recall correctly, it was indicated that a majority of the classrooms were actually closer to the Church Walk Bridge. Did I hear that correctly?
You did. I think it's 70%, 80%.
The Ithan is more associated with the sports facilities and athletic facilities down that end, or do I have that wrong?
And there are some classroom spaces and other destinations which are neither academic or sports related. Some student facilities. I don't know the campus that well to give you a complete answer, but.
So it's not just the proximity of the parking in relation to the quickest means of getting across the street. It's the parking also with the quickest means of getting to the classes that they seek to go to.
That's our thought, yes.
Okay, thank you.
And that thought was actually supported by the DVRPC model, because I had some questions about the assumptions that Mr. Devani made. But when the DVRPC report came out, there was Blue Toad MAC address picking up cell phone usage, and it actually supported what Mr. Devani was indicating there, and that the majority of those students were moving from that point to the northwest side of campus. So it did support it. So there were two independent studies that were done that supported each other.
Correct.
Having sat on the exit ramp from 476 South at 7 p.m. last night due to a backup extending past through 20 to the Ithan Street intersection with 30 East, wouldn't widening South Ithan, in addition to the right-hand lane, the right turn lane that I strongly support, widening South Ithan to 4 lanes, enable a right-hand turn on Red, which is currently impossible due to it only being a single lane? And wouldn't that further reduce the backup? I too am strained to believe the 90 cars per hour number.
Anytime you would add capacity, theoretically you would improve the efficiency of the intersection. So the answer to your question is yes. Now the real question is that something that is required of Villanova based on their analysis and based on what I can insist upon regulatorily? And so far, we have not reached a conclusion.
It would seriously reduce the 1,000 cars that are going down Aldwyn to avoid that intersection.
Person back there who has not yet spoken, I'd like to give her the mic first.
Similar to what you just mentioned, also pedestrian traffic across Ithan. If you're a student in the new dorm and you need to get to your car, the new parking garage, that's going to increase pedestrian traffic, and I just wonder if that's been addressed and where those students are going to cross. And my other concern also is something that hasn't been brought up, and it may not be that important, but I'm aware that there are camps that go on all summer at Villanova campus, and there's bus traffic, and many young students who are not college age who are also going to be probably rerouted and added to the whole scenario, and is wondering how that was going to be handled as well.
Some of these comments are more like planning issues per se, especially with the summer students and summer camps. The only comment, I guess, from PennDOT's perspective on that is if those volumes are significantly less than the normal peak or event volumes, we would not typically look at those, because we're always seeking to look at, not that we don't want them accommodated, please don't misinterpret what I'm saying. Of course, the pedestrians have to be accommodated. But if they're accommodated in the highest level, highest peak hour, we kind of make the assumption that if there are lower numbers, it can certainly handle those lower numbers if it can handle the higher numbers. So that's why we wouldn't necessarily look at something that is like a non-peak event.
Mr. R.
Thank you. First of all, thank you for clarifying and asking the question to clarify the dates of some of those of the early traffic studies. Appreciate that. The question had been out there. I'm glad that it is settled and that Amy has concurred on that, so that we all know it. But my question is kind of an obvious one. And I guess it should be asked, maybe it has in other places, if if most of the pedestrian traffic, the students are going to the west side of the campus to go to their classes, and we're making the case that most of the traffic to the east side are going to the sporting events and that kind of thing, is it at all possible and if, for example, the addition of a right turn lane would add more travel time and cycle time to that intersection, is it possible to eliminate that western crossing on Lancaster Avenue? Are you legally bound to have that crossing there, or could those students be made to cross only Lancaster Avenue on the east side, which is a far smaller piece and would not be affected by the addition of a right turn lane?
That's actually an excellent question. What that would involve was the elimination of the PED scramble phase. Theoretically, yes, you can set up an intersection like that, and what would be required would be a pedestrian study, not like the one Villanova did. It's a PennDOT form, and it's pretty easy, and it's not that detailed, but it does examine the intersection, the use, the need, the volumes of pedestrians that would be crossing, and what the justifications would be for the elimination of such crossing. My only concern there is that the volumes here, being as high as they are, not saying one's increasing or not increasing or anything, just given what they are and what they're projecting them to be, I don't know if there would be enough capacity for the pedestrians if we limited them to just a single crossing on the, I guess that would be the east side of the intersection. Okay, so that would be my concerns there, but in theory, that's something that could be done. I'm dubious of whether it would work out, though. It is, absolutely.
Are there any further comments from the audience? Seeing none, I'd like to thank you all for coming, and I trust our comments will be reflected in the upcoming decisions by the Pennsylvania Department of Transportation. And also, we've left absentee ballots and voter registrations on the table because remember, your vote is your voice. With primary elections coming up on May 19th, again, we're grateful for your participation, working together. Thank you.